Good morning, folks. Welcome to another episode of NYC CNC. I have thought about doing this video for a long time. I've had a lot of questions from folks about the business side of the shop. How do you quote a job? How do you price a job? What do you charge? And it's something I do think a lot about, and I've decided if I'm going to do a video, the only way to do it is totally open kimono, a no BS video. So here it is. There's going to be 4 sections to this video. First part is we're going to talk a little bit about me and my shop and what the services that I offer, which to me isn't actually spindle time on the machine. I'm not selling a machine product. I'm usually selling something a little bit different than that. And we'll talk about that. We're going to look at the actual mechanics of how I quote a job. I've got an Excel worksheet and some pricing stuff, and we'll walk through that in a second, and I'll have that Excel file to download on the NYC CNC website. So you're welcome to use that if you'd like. Then in the third part, we're actually going to talk about how I price the job, which doesn't actually relate to how I quote the job, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, stay tuned. And then in the fourth section, we're going to talk about you. I get a lot of questions from folks on how should they price a job, and how do they find customers, and how do they run their business. And if you're interested, I've got some of my own thoughts. And the ultimate theme, though, is you got to do what you want to do. Folks get way too worked up on it's kind of, there's a lot of topics in life there where there are a million opinions, and this is certainly one of them. At the end of the day, you need to run your shop how you want to, and at the end of the day, you need to make a profit, and you need to figure out what profit is acceptable to you. So what am I? To take a step back, and maybe this is a little bit of breaking the fourth wall, if you will. I started this stuff back in 2007. I was living in New York City. I was trying to bring a product to market. I had paid machine shops to make prototypes, and I had paid engineers to design it. At the time, I didn't know anything about machining. I grew up on the farm where I've since moved back to, and I did welding, and my grandfather was a fabricator, so I knew some stuff, more than someone who didn't have that experience, but I didn't know what a Bridgeport was. I didn't really know what an end mill was, so I was pretty darn close to starting from scratch. Maybe you could say I had a lot of the passion, but no experience, father wasn't a machinist, etc. And that background is very important to how I continue to approach problems in my business today, which is I was a layman. I needed things made. Where I was frustrated was we had spent several $1,000s on the machining prototypes. We had spent several $1,000s hiring an engineer to create a wonderful CAD model and drawings, and it was beautiful. I didn't understand it, and I needed to understand it because I was the business guy quarterbacking this project. How do we go from prototype 1 to prototype 2? How do we make this product work? It didn't work. It worked, but not at an acceptable level of performance. And I realized there is no way for me to do this. It would cost 5 figures to have someone else do all of this work, and they're the wrong person to do it anyways, because I'm the one that has the passion. I'm the one that has the experience and the dedication. And on that note, a small tangent here is it's one reason why I'm not a huge believer in certain intellectual protectionism mechanisms like patents. And there's a whole another topic or video that could be had on patents. But at the end of the day, patents are circumventable, and they're very, very, very expensive to defend, not to mention expensive to obtain. And at the end of the day, it makes sense for Pfizer to do a patent on a pharmaceutical drug because they have in-house counsel, they will defend it. It doesn't make sense for someone selling a small product that may be very successful to patent it, because even if you're willing to spend $10,000, $15,000 to create the patent, will you spend $50,000 for the first time somebody infringes on it, whether that infringer is a peer, a similar small person, or a major company that infringes on it? Anyways, my belief is it's the passion and the execution of the business that is what matters. So rewind back to my story here. I knew I was the right person to do this. So I sort of took a break from this project, if you will, this product, and I purchased the TAG benchtop CNC mill that fit in my New York City apartment. I purchased at the time Bobcat CAM, which terrible software, don't ever buy it, but it did the trick for me. And as I've mentioned in other videos, their $3,000 software I think I purchased for about $200. So, and I started learning. I started experimenting. I Some of my early videos actually document this. I'm embarrassed to even mention them, and they're still public, and if you go into my channel, you can go all the way back to the end and look. I didn't know anything. I was trying to engrave friends' names on little Delrin caps. I was trying to make little pointless widgets, just like I wanted to engrave a pocket that had a hex in the middle of it. But it was that youthful energy that was so important for me. And at the time, looking back, I wasn't married, I didn't have a kid, no mortgage to speak of. It was actually a wonderful time because I was able to dedicate so much time to learning. And that can be difficult. If you're 35 and you want to get into this and you've got 2 kids and you work a job or 2 jobs, it's different, it's difficult. So for me, and that's all this little section is about here is me, that was very important. So I spent about 2 years for fun, playing around and learning. And I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, that was so important because there was no pressure. There was no, I got to get this part made, or I got to meet this customer's expectations. It was me having fun. And that is how it morphed. It morphed from me having fun to my family and my friends and acquaintances and word of mouth folks hearing that I was doing this. They were seeing me talk about it. I don't even think Facebook was really around or popular back then. So it was more just, talking, but I loved it. And then folks would ask, and I had some really quirky early jobs. I think one of the first actual paying jobs was a guy who needed a sailboat mast drilled, and it was on a curve, and it was a short aluminum section, so he was able to bring it over. And I was nervous, and but I knew I could do it, and I knew I had my height gauge to mark the hole locations, and I knew the feeds and speeds. So anyways, a theme you'll hear me come back to for me, and it's going to be different from you, which we'll talk about in a minute, is how you want to grow your business. I grew very organically. I grew at a very slow pace. So fast forward to today, what am I selling? I'm not really selling what I call spindle time. In other words, if you have a product and you need 50 made or 100 made or 1,000 made, all you care about is the material cost and the time it's going to cost you to get those chips removed in an acceptable manner. I do end up doing some of that work. Most of the time, the inquiries and customers I get and I work with are folks that want more than that. They usually want to understand, and sometimes they don't even know they want this, and I'll presumptively offer it. They usually want to understand more about what happens. Is their part designed well? How will it be made? Should it be machined? Should it be 3D prototyped? Should it be machined in such a way that the same part can be later cast for volume production? Is it something that needs to be done in 2 parts instead of 1? Those sorts of questions. So a lot of times when someone emails me for a quote, they don't know what they're asking for. They want the part made, but I don't get a lot of requests for quotes that have very, very detailed drawings with acceptable tolerances where you need not contact the customer at all. You could literally just run with it. I'm usually doing a little bit more hand-holding, which we'll talk about later when it comes to profitability. So a great example of a win for me as a business guy and a shop guy, and a real win for the customer is I'll get a part, I'll kind of get an understanding of what it's supposed to do. I'll take a look at the part, and I may say to them, hey, this is a great fit. This is an interesting project to me. I will make you 3 of these as you're requesting, but then let's do this. You should really budget, and I'll give you a quote, to let me tweak these CAD drawings. Let's talk about how that will affect the design or the tolerances, etc. And then let me send you those 3 parts, and then I'll send you your IGES files, SolidWorks files, detailed drawings that have the stuff that machine shops actually care about. And if those parts are acceptable, once you get them and test them, I'll give you some tips or some lead points, or I'll even hop on the phone with you so you can call some real machine shops, either in your area or wherever is appropriate, and get quantity runs on 50 or 100 or 200. Customers love that because it shows that I'm not trying to hold them hostage by certain amounts of information. It's usually an olive branch that's well welcomed to say, geez, I really don't know anything about this. I could use some help. And at the end of the day, I don't want that customer when they're a 50 or 100 order customer. So sometimes I do, but usually it's not that I don't want them. It's not that I'm going to be competitive, and maybe I can. Maybe I could, or a shop like mine could get them to out of almost ignorance accept an order at a volume. But the reality is, if they know what they're doing, they should be able to go somewhere else and get work done relatively inexpensive. And like it or not, it's a pretty efficient market when you're at volume production. A company I formerly ran, actually it was a company that came out of that project back in 2007. We were doing 1,000, 2,000 part runs, and let me tell you, you can get some very, very competitive pricing from folks. Now, I'm not talking about being a scumbag and beating people up and not paying and blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about working with a real machine shop, that's your partner, but pushing them on pricing. So to wrap up the sort of first section of this video, I'm not even a machinist. I machine stuff, but I have no formal training. I am not a tool and die guy. I never did an apprenticeship. I never worked for another machinist. I'm very proud of what I can do. I love what I do. I only take jobs on where I feel like I can absolutely meet, if not exceed, the customer's expectations. But again, going back to those expectations, usually those expectations aren't related to having half a thou run out across a 3-inch diameter hole. Usually those expectations are related to, hey, I need to get a product working or project working, or I need to get something to the next step. And part of that is the machine part that I'd like you to deliver as the vendor. But part of it's also gaining a much better understanding of what they're trying to do and how to do it and so forth. So I like that. I like that level of trust. I like the fact that it earns me a lot of, and again, this is sort of an open kimono video. It earns me a lot of trust with my customers when I'm willing to say, hey, look, let me make a few of these, but then we're going to push you out into the real world for the rest of these. Okay, so now that part's over, let's take a look at how I work up the math behind a quote. So here is my Excel file that I use when I work up quotes. This will be available somewhere on the NYC CNC website. I'm about to redo this website, so I don't know where it's going to be going forward, but I'll post the updated link in the video description below for you. For now, it's going to probably be under project blog, which may actually be renamed to the Wednesday widget. This video isn't technically a Wednesday widget, but I'll make sure it's available, or shoot me an email if you'd like. You can't find it. So what I do is every time I get a quote from a new customer, I will rename my shop quote file here to that customer's name, and I'll go ahead and put in their information. This takes a little bit of time, and time is something I'm going to talk a lot about because time is ultimately your enemy. There's a lot of little stuff when it comes to running job shops that takes time, and you may not realize it, but it'll crush your productivity over time. Talking to customers, quoting, researching CAD stuff, and it's one reason why I'll talk again later in this video about how difficult job shop work is, but also I have some hard lines and hard rules, like I don't talk on the phone to customers unless they're a paying customer. I'll get into that. I generally don't like taking on projects if it's at the idea stage because I'm not the best fit. Let me put that off for a second here. I'll come back to it. But what I try to do is create a master resource. And the reason I do this is I've gotten in trouble before where folks have tried to change information up on me, change the shipping address or stuff like that. And I used to keep it in just the Gmail, and I'd go re-look at it. That worked when I wasn't doing a lot of jobs, but I've been busy enough over the past few years where I need to know I have a repository of information that's accurate. So if someone emails me and says something quirky, like they change the part, they say, I don't want to powder coat it anymore, I'm going to send it out to anodize, even though the drawing they may have sent says must be powder coated. I'll go put that somewhere in here so that I know I can always see it. So name, billing, shipping, some notes like what I just mentioned, or I have customers at universities who need certain things done with regard to their purchase orders and invoices to make sure that they get reimbursed from their administration, things like that. But I try to do well for customers, and I like to I pride myself on organization. And if a customer tells me something, I want to keep that written down and know it, so if they come back for a job later, I'm not asking the same question again. I'm helping make them efficient as I can. And that goes back to, again, the service I'm offering. With that university example, I'm offering not only a service of machine parts, but these are PhD professors or students or whatever who they don't want to, they're not in the business of procurement. They're not, their job, full-time job is not to sit around and procure machine parts. Their job is to conduct experiments, and an unnecessary and a necessary evil of that is sourcing parts. And so the easier I can make it on them to get these parts made, build, reimbursed, the more time they can spend on their experiments. And I tell you, that matters. They like that. Email, phone, and then I do a little note about, if I had a history with this person, whether it's with this job or another company or something, so I can jog my memory. What I then do is every time I bid or quote a job, I keep a tab on it. And that's important not only for obvious reasons, but this I'm calling the second portion of this video, which is the mechanics of how I quote. That is not actually how I quote the job, which is maybe controversial to some folks. But I keep track of this because I want to know what I've charged in the past for other jobs so that I can make sure there's some level of continuity. So I'd have past jobs, which this is just a template, they're empty. But so here's how I would go through a new job. And this, I do mostly aluminum quoting, so this is sort of pre-set up for aluminum. If it's a steel job, I don't keep a lot of steel on hand, certainly not certified grade steel. So if I have to do that and I have to quote it, I'll change this up. But what I have, what this lets me do is I type in the size of the part. So this would be a 5 by 7 by 1/2 inch thick piece of aluminum. And I pay a little less than aluminum by the pound for that, but $2.50 is fine. And what this formula here does is it just calculates the volume of the part and multiplies it by the cost per pound, and I get with the material cost of the part. So you do, the volume is simply the 3 dimensions multiplied together. Aluminum has that weight, and I got that from my G-Wizard software, which I really do like. You can see it right here, the pounds per cubic inch of aluminum is 0.0975, and a 250 pound, that part would cost me about $4.27. Again, that's slightly more than I pay anyways. And then of course you mark that up. So down here in the material, the cost links back to the total cost, but then the total here, even though it's only quantity 1, includes a markup, 150%. May sound like a lot. Look, I'm making less than $2 on a little piece of aluminum like that. So I also keep these 2 lines here because if I need to order material or if I need to order tooling like an end mill or a drill bit, I need to keep track of that, because another way you lose money and waste time is if you have to go place another order. If I placed a McMaster order and I forgot to order an end mill or a chamfer tool I needed, man, I get ticked. That's more time I got to go create to create another order, another $5 or $6 in shipping. You don't get in the habit of doing that. So how do I quote a part? Material we covered. So I go through the operations, and you can't leave anything out. On the flip side, don't spend hours quoting it. But what do you have to? I walk through it in my head. Okay, I've got bar stock in the back of the shop. I need to pull that out, and I need to put it on the bandsaw. That probably takes me 10 minutes. So I usually put something like $3, $5 to cut a part. That's for one. If it's 10, it's maybe cheaper. On a lot of parts, you'll have to machine the edges to size, or create some reference geometry on the OD of the part before you actually do your machining, if you will. So I think about it. So forget about this for now. I just think about it, and I think I would like to earn $10, because I've got to take that part, I've got to maybe deburr it off the bandsaw or something, so I know it's in the vise okay, and I got to make sure it's parallel or perpendicular with a machinist square, clamp it down, throw an end mill in there, face off a couple edges, size it up, something like that. I think, okay, I'd like to make $10 to do that. And then the first operation is and then op 3 would be the first real, CNC machine operation, whatever you're doing, pocketing, drilling, chamfering. And I think, okay, I've got to set up 2 or 3 tools or use 2 or 3 tools, and that's going to take me about 13, 15 minutes or something. I'd like to make $25 for that. And, this number may include, maybe higher because I'm using a multi-$1,000 CNC machine versus just a bandsaw. That's kind of, again, I'm just talking out loud here, folks. I'm not expecting you to always agree or disagree. I'm just sharing how I do it. Maybe flip the part over, do the same thing on the bottom side, and then they want the part powder coated, so I think, okay, I'd like to make $15 for that, which now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably at the bottom end of what I'd want to quote to powder coat one part. It's not profitable to do that. We'll come back, however, to why I'm willing to do certain things for certain customers, because again, I'm not always in the business of selling the machine part. I may be in the business of working with someone where there is future opportunity. I know I say I push a lot of people away if they're volume, but that's not to say I don't do a lot of repeat business with a lot of customers who value the services I offer, which I probably should have talked about more in section 1, but I offer certainty of quality, which I know everybody says, but I do pride myself on that. And going back to section 1 again, I'm not a machinist. I'm a layman in that sense who happens to know how to run these machines. So I'm conversant in a language where I'm not beholden. And man, I've worked with engineers. I'm working with engineers right now on a project. It is so frustrating when they over-engineer things or they are detached from reality. And I swear it's an asset to me every day that I'm able to approach things as a consumer or a layman or an end user and not just as the engineer and machinist. So that gets me a lot of repeat business from folks. So I may be willing to do powder coating for $15, even though, frankly, it'll take me more than 15 minutes to do all that prep work. Heck, it takes 15 or 20 minutes alone just to bake it, although I don't have to sit there. Anyway, you guys get the idea. We're focused on these two columns here. Do I charge to do any CAD work? Do I charge to do any CAM work? Of course, I usually do. Inevitably, you'll have some uncompensated labor in a quote. Something, whether it's pulling out the bar stock and cutting it up, or deburring a part. There's always something that you're not necessarily paid for. It takes time to ship a part. Really, you start having 10 orders go out a day, and let me tell you, it takes time to get all those orders straightened up, make sure the parts are clean, wrap them up in wrapping, print labels, get the right boxes, make sure they're packed securely, stay organized. It takes time. It adds up, especially if you're going to scale this business. If you want to make 2 parts a week for folks, you may not think about that as taking any time, but that's not necessarily a real business. Maybe a nice side business, but you've got to think about what you want to get out of this business. And if you scale it, I'm telling you, people always think things get cheaper when you get them bigger. No, they get more expensive in my opinion, or many things get more expensive, because things that you used to assume you could keep track of in your head or didn't take that much time, they add up and you've got to factor that in. So I get a total, add in shipping and handling. That should be blue, sorry. No, it's not. Blue, by the way, are inputs. Black are outputs, so you generally only change the blue numbers. These numbers are all black because they're slaved to this master quantity, and you do that when you have dollar signs before the column and row in Excel. If you copy and paste it down, it doesn't move, or if you didn't have those, it moves. If you guys want more Excel help, I'm happy to do another video on that. So you could change one of these. Let's say you needed to do 2 cuts for every part or something. You could just override it. So that gives me the total. Then I think, okay, do I want to make $122 on this part, knowing I've got $6 or $7 in cash costs? Do I like that? Then after that, I look and I go in and I put in the estimated time. How long do I think it's going to take me to cut the bandsaw part? And I don't mean drop the blade on it. I mean I've got to go pull that material. I've got to set it up. If it's on a 12-foot piece of extrusion, I've got to set up my support. I've got to set up a stand. Now that's not necessarily the customer's fault. That's my fault that I don't have a permanent setup for there, but I still think about it. I think about how long do I think it's going to take me to machine that part. And again, I don't mean the G-code cycle time. I mean set up the part, if I've got to rotate the vise, all that stuff. And I think about it, and I put those times in. Ignore this. I just put the times in. Then I go back and I look at, okay, what does that mean I'm making per hour to do that part? And again, this is based on what I'm thinking I'd like to make, and this is based on how much time I think, and that backs me into this amount. And they may vary widely. It could be $20 an hour for bandsawing. It could be $150 an hour for certain other types of things. It's a coincidence in the template that a lot of these are the $60 to $75 an hour amount. And again, I want paid a little bit more when I'm running a multi-$1,000 high precision CNC mill where I have high tolerances, or let's say, for instance, if I'm off, I've scrapped the part, that work needs paid more. When I'm doing, very rough cut bandsaw cuts, you don't need to make as much. Okay, so that's the math behind how I quote. But like I said, as we segue into the third section of this video, ultimately, that's not how I quote. I know that may sound crazy to folks, and you guys may not agree with this, but what I do is I use it as a reference of what could I charge, or it's a point. Ultimately, that's just a point of reference. What I then do is I think about the customer, and I read the customer, and I think, what are they looking for? Are they just reselling this part where it's just a dollar shopping type thing, or are they trying to do a Kickstarter campaign and they need certainty of execution and there's some urgency to it, or is it just simply a customer or repeat customer who says, hey, I really need this done in 3 days. I know there's a rush premium on it or something like that. Sometimes I'll offer 2 different prices for 2 different delivery dates. But what I then do is I think about, if I were the customer, what is a fair price to charge for that? Because taking a step back, not necessarily related to the machining, but in life and as a businessman, my belief in life is you don't base products on what they cost, you base products on what the market will bear, and then you figure out, based on what it costs, is that an interesting opportunity? And that's not, again, for machine products, that applies for if you're making toolboxes or guns or anything. What will the market willing to pay for this? So what is a customer willing to pay for what I'm delivering? And again, going back to the first section of this video, a lot of times what I'm delivering isn't just the machine product. It's some advice, it's some hand-holding. So I will then adjust the quote. Sometimes I adjust it down. Sometimes I realize, geez, I like making $60-$70 an hour on some of this machine work, but I know that this is a pretty easy job. They're never going to reject these on tolerances. They're sandblasting them, so I don't even need to deburr them, and they want 20 of them. And it's an easy job, so I should be okay with making less on it. It has to do with how busy your shop is. Are you looking to take on more work, or are you at capacity? That changes how I bid things. Right now, I've got a part-time guy helping me, so I've actually taken on more jobs that I normally wouldn't love, because they're simple jobs and I want him to learn, and it's a way for me to train him for free. I'm making some money, but I'm paying him, but he's learning, and if he screws a part up, it's pretty easy to fix, and that's a real win for me. I also think about the fact that I should make money as the guy who's doing the labor, so I should be paid as a machinist or whatever you want to call it, but the business should make money as well, because there's a difference between me doing work as a laborer and the fact that I have a business that I've invested tens of thousands of dollars in at this point, in capital, in equipment, and that equipment should earn money above and beyond just my labor. I'm very harsh on people who think that they can do something for nothing, and they're so excited, and I'm excited too. I love this stuff, but it's okay if you want to do stuff like this and not make a profit, but it's not a business then, it's a hobby, and that's okay, but call it what it is. If you want to run this as a hobby, run it as a hobby. More power to you. You may be happier. Trust me, there was a time when I was running a business trying to run my Tormach at a high capacity, and I never talked about this stuff on the YouTube videos, where I didn't really like machining anymore. It's the joke of everyone loves to visit Hawaii and think it's the best place on the world, and then you live there. If you move there and you live there, you realize, oh man, I got to get out of here. A couple other things on the third section of this video of how I actually quote. I will usually quote a specific dollar amount, $432, $717. Why? Because it looks like you put more time and thought into it than if it's $750 or $450. You guys might think that that's sleazy of me, but I do put thoughts into these quotes, and I want the customer to know that and see that. So I usually quote very specific amounts. Jobs under $250, I require 100% payment up front. Rare exceptions, very rare exceptions, because I've actually never been burned, but it's not worth my time to chase someone down for that small an amount. I'm a busy guy, and if someone takes the parts and doesn't want to pay me for a $100 job, honestly, aside from some nasty emails or phone calls, it's not worth my time. I'm not going to turn them over to a credit agency or a collection agency. On jobs over $250, what I try to do is make sure I get 25% down, assuming that that covers double my out-of-pockets. So if I have to buy raw materials or use my raw materials or buy tooling, I want to make sure that if they cancel the job as I'm already finishing it up or doing it, or if they don't pay, I've at least not broken even. I've at least made a few bucks. That's usually not hard. I've actually really never had a problem with payment or payment terms with customers, and I think that's not because I'm good. I think it's because I don't think that's for any other reason than I don't take on tons of work, and I end up talking to a lot of my customers. I work with them. I understand what they're doing. It's pretty quick and pretty easy for me to weed out the folks that aren't in it for the right reasons. Meaning I make parts for folks, like I said, going back to number one, who really want to do something, and those people are vested in it. They're not interested in not paying, if you will. I also charge a lot up front, which solves that problem. If you scale a business beyond what I've done, you run a real job shop where you're doing lots of work every day, you'll get burned. There are customers who won't pay. You'll have problems. It's you have to think about your projections and budget and financials with both collection loss and time you spend tracking down folks and the emotional toll. It ticks me off when I've had other businesses where folks they'll do credit card chargebacks or they'll do things that will frustrate you. Unfortunately, there are some bad apples out there, and you've got to assume that you'll have them. Okay, so fourth part of this, talk about you. How do you grow your business? How do you get into this? How do you become a machinist? How do you become a machine shop? How do you create products or make money making products? It's a question for you. You have to choose what sort of path you want to go down. There are folks out there who would be perfectly fine using credit card debt, borrowing money from friends and family, small business loans, financing equipment. You could, these days, with the way the banks and lenders work, you could, if you've got decent credit, you could get $50,000 or $100,000 machine. Heck, you could probably go get a Haas with very little money down, because the way our world works, they love pushing out equipment for financing it, and you could all of a sudden have a ton of equipment. So that's usually not a hurdle in today's day and age. I don't agree with that. It's not something I'm interested in doing it. And unless you have a concrete, reliable revenue path with that equipment, you got to assume you're going to be paying out of pocket to make that payment every month. So I don't like that. I also don't like it because it doesn't coincide with how I prefer to grow, which is an organic growth, a slower growth. Slower isn't acceptable to all people. Some people can't afford that. If you have to immediately make money doing this, then the only thing I can tell you is to have a daytime job or another source of income and do this every free minute you can and build this up on the side to a point where you're comfortable switching over. That's difficult. It's even harder if you've got kids, second jobs, families, travel, etc. But there's no free lunch. You got to figure that out. When you do work, you have to take pride in it, especially early on. You have to deliver parts that exceed expectations. Sometimes that means you got to eat costs or labor. The way that happened with me was I ran a hobby for 2 years. I didn't make a dime. I did this for fun, for myself, for projects and gifts for my wife, for or girlfriend at the time, stuff like that. That's cheating because it's not a business. It's a hobby that turned into a business. But folks ask me, hey, man, how do I learn how to do this? You just got to do it. How do you find customers? You do good work and word spreads. Seriously, people don't like that because it's not instant. It takes time. For me, it was repeat customers. It was customers who not only liked the product, but man, when they were talking to their friends, they said, this guy was great because he helped me be above and beyond what I did. So what are you selling? That's ultimately what this is about. Most of you who are watching this, folks that are watching this aren't the folks who have 10 Haas's in an ISO 9000 whatever facility. There are folks probably like me or me 5 years ago who want to understand how to grow a business. It'll take time, and if you want instant results, you got to take greater risks that cost money. You can advertise, you can go to trade shows, you can put your name out there, but I think you've got to be pretty calculated if you want to figure out what your return on investment is on making decisions like that. When it comes to quoting jobs, people get so worked up. I already mentioned it. Quote how you want to. All I ask is be honest with yourself. Don't lie to yourself, and it's so easy to do, and I say it because I used to do it. Be honest about the time it takes you to make a part. Don't think, oh, I want to make $60 an hour and I'll get there by ignoring the fact that there were 2 hours of this job that I just didn't account for. It takes time, especially if you're going to scale a business. Really, it takes time to order materials. If you got to track, oh my gosh, I'm almost out of my 6x6x12 boxes. I need to go on Uline and order that. It takes time, and it mentally takes time because you've now all of a sudden got to keep track of boxes, tooling, shipping, raw materials. It adds up, folks. I've mentioned it before, you have to make a profit if it's a business. It's not actually hard to make a profit if you watch your expenses. I don't think of my Tormach as an expense because I think of that as it being a capitalized asset, but I do think about I need to make a return on that investment or that asset, which is why I talk about when I quote jobs, not only do I need to be paid for my labor, but I need to make, or the business that owns that asset needs to make some money as well. And the last thing I'll talk about is time. Time is everything. One reason why the job shop world, in my opinion, is so tough is it's skilled labor and it's unskilled labor. I'm the guy who quotes, that reads the emails, that writes back to customers, that does the CAM, that does some of the CAD work, that runs the machine. That all takes time. It's very difficult to scale that above just myself. And I've actually just recently learned that lesson as I've had part-time help come in. He's great. He's actually a trained machinist, but it doesn't matter because when I do the CAM, there's too much stuff I do in my head, even if it's all documented with a tool list and all that I wouldn't be profitable to hand over the file and a part to him. So example, the other day I was running a part on my tool table and I had strap clamps on, and when I got over and set the part up, I realized, I didn't change my safe plane up high enough to clear those the toe clamps or strap clamps. He would have never known that. So if I had let him run that job, which he would have been capable of, we would have crashed the mill, broken a $25 end mill, probably ruined the workpiece, lost a lot of time, had to recreate the part. It was a piece of aluminum that I plasma cut as a prep, so I've got to redo all that. He would have been frustrated because he's relatively new and he's trying to please, which is great, but and I would have not faulted him at all, but nevertheless, it's not a happy thing. So I say that even though that sounds like a very specific example, but because for me, I'm not interested in creating the lists and structures and mechanisms in place to be able to hand a CAD and CAM file over to someone else and run it on my equipment. It's just not profitable. Now, he can still do a lot of other things. He's done a lot of surface grinding. He can create a lot of pre-cut blanks and parts, and that saves me money, and that's wonderful. But there's still a limit to how much I can scale that unless you really invest in training him, and that gets into a whole nother, assuming and banking on training employees is way beyond the scope of this video, because now you've got a business that's reliant on skilled labor, and skilled labor is difficult. You've got to make sure you can keep them happy and retain them, and if they leave, are you now in a position where it takes you 6 months, 9 months to get back up to speed? A whole list of things that create additional complications there. So anyways, going back to time, for me, time is so important. I have a 7-month-old child. I love spending time with him. I run other businesses in addition to machine work and making these videos, which these videos take a lot of time as well. I love it. I couldn't think of a better thing to do, but time is important to me. I am totally willing to invest in software or things that save me time. I use software called SugarSync that syncs all my files across 4 different computers that I have. I have a computer at the shop. I have a laptop that I always keep with me. It's in my go bag with me, and if I get stuck somewhere, I got to do an oil change randomly or whatever, I've got my laptop with me. I can do 20 minutes worth of work. I don't mean to sound like I'm an important person, but time is very important to me. But I need to know that I can hop on to any of those computers and have access to my files to quote. And then for proprietary software like SolidWorks and CAM, I pay for Log Me In. Log Me In gives me access to get onto any of my computers from anywhere in the world, from any web browser. Not that I travel all over the world, but if I'm at a friend's house and I need to go tweak something, I can say, hey, sorry guys, can I go hop on a computer real quick and do something? Or if I'm visiting my in-laws and I don't know, I usually have my laptop, but nevertheless, you Log Me In, SugarSync, those types of things are very important to me. I pay for shipping software so that I can very quickly print trackable labels. It's a waste of time to print a label out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, take scissors, cut it out, 3 pieces of tape onto the box. Not to mention, sounds silly, but the professional printed labels on the Zebra label maker, they look really nice, they look really professional. That matters. I think customers see that. And then one of the last things, which I don't think it's controversial, but I don't talk to customers on the phone unless they're a paying customer. And if you guys, some of you who are watching this may have actually seen me write back on that. To me, it is an unprofitable and unfortunate, but unprofitable use of time to speak with folks on the phone. And we all know it, no one wants to say it, but you get stuck with people who just want to ramble, and I can't afford to do that. It's one reason why I do the videos. It's a way of speaking to everybody at once, but I can't afford to talk to someone about their Grizzly retrofit that they want to do. And, people will think you're kind of an asshole if you say, oh, I'm happy to talk on the phone about your Grizzly mill, but my rate is X dollars an hour. I don't even like doing that. Now, for paying customers or jobs that are real, of course you talk on the phone. But it's something I stopped doing years ago, which is I just don't talk on the phone. I guess I'm talking to you about that because it's frustrating that I have to do that, because I hate businesses where or experiences where you can't get to the right information quickly. In other words, I hate dialing companies where it's press 1 for English, press 2 for this department, blah, blah. We care about your time. Our numbers recently changed. Please listen to the whole thing. I hate that. For the businesses I run, we've always done direct lines that a human answers. I saw that on Custom Ink's website years ago when I was buying t-shirts, and they say, talk to a real person, call this number. I love that. So I'm a big fan of that experience. It doesn't work, though, in the NYC CNC and job shop model. It just doesn't. So that's a wrap. I hope you guys have learned something. I never anticipated sharing this much information, but I, again, knew if I was going to do it, I had to put it all out there. So looking forward to seeing what folks say in the comments below. And yeah, I mean, if you guys have liked this or not liked it, feel free to thumbs up or thumbs down it, or well, you guys know the rest of the drill. So that's it for today, folks. I'll see you next Wednesday for the Wednesday widget. Take care.